Hi, everybody. I'm Tony Wilson here with my good friend and co-host Adrian Wright, and this is
The Supernatural and Beyond.
And we're back. We've been covering the star constellations that are out there. Again, not having anything to do with astrology. It's called astronomy, which is the study of the star constellations and how in their rotation or circuit they will show us a story from the beginning when the creator created everything to the end when he brings a new heaven and a new earth. So
looking forward to that time. Yeah, I like to think of astronomy as like the science behind the stars, you know, like where they're placed.
Another good, I'm going to use that.
Yeah, the terminology kind of helps define what it is.
Good.
Because it's not looking into them to try to make any kind of prediction, but it's like the relationship to the stars and where the planet is and the times and the seasons. And it's just a good way to remember it. One thing we've been talking about in the last few segments is we talked about the constellations. And one thing I noticed is there's like 12 constellations.
Interesting.
The 12 tribes of Judah.
Then we've got 12 months of the year.
12 months of the year, yeah. And it's all measured by the stars.
Yeah, and that was how they kept track. You know, if you listen or study the Hebrew, the people, the Hebraic people, had certain times where they were to have certain festivals and certain holidays going on. So they didn't have mass-produced calendars.
Yeah.
But they had the star constellations that are out there all the time. That's how they knew when to observe these feast and festival times.
Yeah, the times and the seasons. And one thing that's interesting, too, is, you know, we've talked about it, but they tell a story. You know, the constellations tell a story, and it just depends on where you get the information from. So we're focusing on the ancient Hebrews.
Yes.
Before it was corrupted by the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, before the mythologies were added in there. And one thing that's believed is that these stories were used by, like, Adam and Eve, Enoch, Abraham, to try to pass down the stories.
Yes.
Of, you know, the Messiah and the coming Messiah and God's plan of redemption. So in other segments, we've talked about Virgo, Libra, Scorpio. We talked about Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. And so now we're going to touch on Gemini, Cancer, and Leo. And one of the things I found interesting with Gemini, looking at the meanings of some of the stars in that constellation and some of the Hebrew meanings of the deacons around there, was marriage of the Lamb.
Marriage of the Lamb?
Yeah, marriage of the Lamb is tied in there to the actual Hebrew meaning. And then also King of Glory.
King of Glory.
Yeah, which is a reference to Jesus and the Messiah and the coming King. And the marriage supper of the Lamb is like the time frame, you know, so it's almost like a prophecy in the whole thing, because we're waiting for Christ to come back and we're going to have the marriage supper of the Lamb.
So while we're talking about this, for those of us who aren't as versed in the scriptures as you are, what is this marriage supper of the Lamb?
The marriage supper of the Lamb is when the believers in the Messiah are brought to actually marry the Messiah, to have like an actual marriage kind of celebration.
Marriage celebration, okay.
Yeah, so in the scriptures it talks about like the marriage supper of the Lamb, where the bride, the believers, are being made ready for the Messiah coming back.
Okay. So this is with Gemini. Okay, well, again, we have a lot to cover in a short period of time. So thanks for just, sharing that with us.
Yeah, it's in the Hebrews, and the Hebrew meaning of the stars in that constellation.
There was also an aspect that I came across in some of my research that said this was the aspect of the God and man. So it's like twins because God was, man was created in God's image and likeness, and even with Adam and Eve, the story of Adam and Eve came from the rib of of the man.
Right.
So once again, this is kind of what you just said, kind of like, whoa, wait a minute, I got to do some more research and see what this is all about. But, just off the top of my head, connecting the dots that I have, I could see where there would be a dual nature, because it's even said that Yeshua is God, Yeshua is man.
Yes. And so what I found doing my research on Cancer for the meaning of the stars in that constellation, the Hebrew meaning, was the lesser fold and the greater fold, like the sheepfolds. So you have the lesser fold and the greater fold, which is represented as the lesser fold is the ancient Hebrews, the God's chosen Hebrew people, and then the greater fold is all those that became believers in the Messiah and became one into the family of God.
Yeah, I ran into something completely different.
Okay.
The Cancer is represented by the crab.
Right.
And there is no specific mention of a crab in the Hebrew.
Okay.
If it is, because it's not a part of the dietary laws set forth by God in Leviticus, it's considered unclean. It's something we shouldn't eat, like shrimp and bacon and so forth and so on. And so what wound up happening was all of the different cultures that tracked the constellations, they didn't really have a symbol for what the star constellation actually represents.
Right.
So if you look at how the Mazzaroth is laid out, you will see that there is Cancer. Before Cancer, there is Leo, which is in between Virgo. So one of the things that they were saying that the Cancer could possibly represent the Antichrist or substitute Messiah. And Leo is protecting the Virgin, his bride, which we just talked about in Gemini, from this. Now, the one other little interesting fact that I saw in the pictures of how it's laid out is that Leo is standing on the back of a serpent, which takes us all the way back to the Garden of Eden, where it says the heel of the woman will bruise the head of the serpent.
Yeah.
So it's, pictorially speaking, Cancer doesn't really have a representation, but if you look at the way the constellations are laid out, you're like, this might be trying to tell us something.
Yes, and I agree. And you looked back to Genesis, but I looked towards Revelation.
How so, and in what way?
Well, you said it could be a type or a shadow kind of for the Antichrist, right? Like a representation for the Antichrist, right? And so what I was going to say was the Antichrist tries to harm the virgin, right? And that's referenced in Revelations, where there'll be signs and wonders in the heavens. And there was the reference to the pregnant woman that was being attacked by the beast, and she was trying to flee, and she was protected.
Again, serpent, an antichrist or substitute Messiah trying to harm the virgin or the bride.
Right.
Wow, this
and
is
maybe
good stuff.
Maybe the constellation gets corrupted and we think it's a crab, but maybe in reality it's more like a scorpion. So I'm going to have to do some more research on that and see, because the scorpions also have the claws. But I want to move right into our final constellation here, and probably the most important one, and that's Leo.
Leo.
And so I got a lot of information on Leo, so I'm just going to go through there real quick. But in Hebrew, it was Ara, A-R-I-E-H, and that means lion. And it represents the lion from the tribe of Judah.
Tribe of Judah.
Which is the Messiah, Yeshua, right?
Judah came from.
And then the brightest star in that constellation was Regulus, right? And it means treading underfoot. And the meaning of the names in some of that constellation cluster was coming judge.
Coming judge.
Coming judge. Fleeing serpent.
Fleeing serpent.
And the judge shall reign. And then also when you look at it, it's like the constellations in the Hebrew meaning, it also means the king defeating the serpent.
Well, there's an interesting coincidence.
Yeah. Huge coincidence, right?
Yes, yeah. So, once again, people, do your own research. However, these little tidbits should kind of perk your curiosity as to what you want to do and which way you want to go and which way you want to believe.
Yeah, and we want to thank you for following us here at the Supernatural and Beyond. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and then leave a comment down below, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe for more content.